Recognizing the signs of anxiety is obviously vital for anybody looking to understand or overcome their anxiety. However, more often than not, there can be hidden signs of anxiety that people fail to recognize. And on this week's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to take a look at the top 6 signs of hidden anxiety. What's up guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched, and like I said, this week we're taking a look at the top 6 signs of hidden anxiety, and we're going to be looking at everything from physical symptoms to cognitive irregularities, signs of anxiety that people often don't recognize. Guys, also make sure to hit the like button on today's video, and you can comment on the video and I'll be sure to get back to you. I would love to know your thoughts and your experiences on some of the signs of hidden anxiety that we talk about here, and maybe you've got your own signs of hidden anxiety that we've not covered. Let us know in the comments. You can also subscribe to GetPsyched if you're enjoying our videos, and you can hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get weekly reminders every time we upload. So let's kick off. Maybe you wake up in the morning and feel like something terrible is about to happen, or that disaster is right around the corner. Often that impending sense of dread can sometimes feel like it comes out of nowhere, but can be a really key but hidden sign of anxiety. What makes this in particular like a key sign of hidden anxiety is that that sense of dread sometimes doesn't necessarily have a focus, and people can wake up in the morning and have this overwhelming sense that something really bad is about to happen, or that in some way they need to kind of lie low in case they need to protect themselves, or that there's some kind of disaster lurking right around the corner if they step outside their house. It's part of the reason why this can be a hidden sign of anxiety, because it's not very well understood, that kind of impending sense of dread. You can see also how this can become a bit of a perpetual cycle for anxiety, that this hidden sign of anxiety, this sense of dread, can actually lead people to enact avoidant behaviors, which can be really detrimental when it comes to overcoming anxiety. You know, for example, somebody wakes up in the morning and they have this kind of weird sense of dread, one of those hidden signs of anxiety, and as a result they maybe think, you know what, I'm not going to go into work today because I'm starting to feel this kind of weird sensation. I don't really know what it is or where it's come from, and as a result they start to enact these avoidant behaviors that are keeping them distant from things that they maybe need to expose themselves to that would be helpful in the management of their anxiety. Don't get me wrong, there are times when we kind of require a sense of dread, I suppose. There's also definitely times that we require levels of anxiety. If you're about to sit an exam at university, for example, or you're about to go for an interview for a job, it's natural that you would feel that level of anxiety. It's also pretty natural, I suppose, that you would feel that level of dread. However, it's when you experience that dread, when you don't require it, that can be considered as a hidden sign of anxiety. One of the most peculiar things about anxiety is that it can often take the form of physical symptoms. And I've seen this many times in clients that I've worked with and even case studies that I've read about. I remember reading an article once about a woman who was going to dermatologists on a regular basis and GPs and things like that because she was having skin irritation. She was having massive breakouts and rashes and things in her skin. And dermatologists, GPs weren't really sure what was causing it, until, you know, the doctor inquired a little bit in their assessment about her mental health, and it turned out that she had really quite severe anxiety. As she went for therapy, the skin irritation started to dissipate because her anxiety was getting managed. Now that sounds like a really extreme example, and in truth it is, but it's also true that physical symptoms can be manifested. They can come from a bedrock of really poor anxiety. So these kind of physical symptoms can be a really key sign of hidden anxiety. It's one of the signs of anxiety that's most under-recognized. If anybody's ever had a panic attack before, you'll know full well that anxiety can come out in physical symptoms, things like sweating or racing heart rates or, you know, shortness of breath, these kind of things. Sometimes even people with panic attacks feel like they are dying. We actually did a recent video on panic attacks, and if you click the link right above my head here, you can get taken to that and you'll find everything that you need to know about panic attacks and also how to overcome them. Now, this is one of the key things that can be so confusing about anxiety, and it can be one of the ways in which anxiety can go unrecognized. The sign of anxiety being, you know, physical symptomology, changes in your physical symptoms, or things like shortness of breath or racing heart rates or you know, profuse sweating in situations that maybe don't require it. Those are kind of physical symptoms that could mean anxiety. Now, what I would say here, a little bit of a disclaimer, if you think that you're having some of these physical symptoms, it doesn't definitely mean you have anxiety. You need to take all of these symptoms kind of as a whole. And what I would recommend is that you go and see your GP if you think you maybe have some of these signs of hidden anxiety, and maybe getting an assessment about your anxiety. Sometimes it's the randomness, especially when we wake up, that can make anxiety so confusing. Hidden anxiety can often come to the surface when we least expect it. And I've seen this time and time again, and actually my own personal experience, whenever I've experienced episodes of anxiety, I know firsthand that I can start to experience anxiety in really, really random ways. One of those times is when I wake up in the morning. I don't know if you're anything like me, but that time when you kind of wake up and you feel that kind of that impending sense of anxiety, like something's about to happen, you don't really know what it is, that can be one of those hidden signs of a more generalized form of anxiety that can go unrecognized. So if you're having anxiety at random points that don't really require it, then you can start to understand that, maybe there's something here to be said about some underlying anxiety issues that I've got. One of the things I always say to clients, and I say this on GetPsyched as well, is that we shouldn't be too scared of anxiety. Anxiety is one of those mental illnesses, really the only mental illness that we need a little bit of. We can do without depression, we can do it without things like that, but we need a little bit of anxiety. The anxiety is there to serve us, to protect us, to keep us safe in many ways. But when it's starting to do that in times that it's not required, then we can start to understand that maybe there are some signs of more hidden, generalized anxiety that needs dealt with. Okay, so the next key sign of kind of hidden anxiety is illogical thinking patterns. Now that basis of illogical thinking patterns, and I suppose in many ways we all have illogical thinking patterns, but again, this is about maybe changes that you've experienced in recent weeks or months or over the past few years. Maybe those illogical thinking patterns have increased or in areas that they no longer were before. So let me give you an example. Maybe there's an individual who, is able to go to the supermarket, get their shopping, come home, unload their shopping, no problem. It's not an issue for them whatsoever. However, maybe, over the course of a number of weeks or months, they start to experience a level of anxiety and some illogical thinking patterns related to their shopping. Maybe they go into the supermarket and they feel that people are looking at them, or that they feel in some way that people are judging them for the things that they're buying off the shelves in the supermarket. Now, for many people that can seem strange, but actually it's quite common for people to experience a quite high level of anxiety when they go supermarket shopping. It's also quite common for them to experience patterns of illogical thinking, and those patterns of illogical thinking sometimes can represent hidden signs of anxiety. When we say illogical thinking patterns, what I basically mean is thinking patterns that maybe logically don't make sense. So the likelihood of you going to a supermarket, buying your shopping, and taking things off the shelves and people watching you and judging what you're buying is really quite uncommon. It's not likely that would happen. But somebody can get so anxious that they believe that they definitely are being watched, that they are being judged, that people are looking at what they're buying, and their behavior changes as a result of that, and their thinking patterns change as a result of that. Another example might be in the work environment, where they all of a sudden start feeling and thinking that colleagues are kind of gunning for their job or trying to undermine them in the workplace. I'm not going to argue that doesn't happen. Of course, that does happen at times. But when there's not much evidence to suggest that, and yet maybe people are starting to think that can be an example of illogical thinking patterns that can be representative of kind of hidden signs of anxiety. Avoidant behaviors are the things that create safe spaces for us, but result in us creating more distance from the things that cause us anxiety. And in the moment, that kind of stuff seems like a good idea. It seems like a reasonable reaction to our anxiety. And in truth, it is. But it's one of the things that perpetuates anxiety. If we consistently remove ourselves from situations where we feel anxious, we don't give ourselves an opportunity to overcome that anxiety. Intentionally isolating is one of the ways that people can enact on avoidant behaviors without really recognizing that they are experiencing signs of anxiety. So for example, let me take you back to our first point when we talked about that impending sense of dread. What some people can do as a result of that is that they can stay at home. They maybe don't go to work that day, like we said, or they don't go to uni that day, or maybe they don't go and see their friends that weekend, considering this is either pre or post-COVID. But that kind of intentional isolation, that desire to detach from society or organizations or groups of people that person normally would be around, is an example of intentional isolation that often can be representative of hidden signs of anxiety. So this is what we're trying to understand here. Sometimes our cognitive patterns can be evidence of hidden anxiety, but our behavioral patterns sometimes can also be signs of hidden anxiety. So if you experience yourself intentionally isolating yourself or disconnecting from people more than you normally do, that may be representative of signs of hidden anxiety. With anxiety comes more thought of what you did in the past and what you might do in the future. Anxiety really is the opposite of the here and now. It results in thinking patterns or concerns about what has been and worries about what is to come. As a result, people with hidden anxiety sometimes can really struggle with concentrating. If there's a task at hand, maybe a work task or a uni task or family task, and you struggle to concentrate and you struggle to be in the moment, that often can be a sign of hidden anxiety. One of the things that's so unrecognized about this as a sign of anxiety is that sometimes we think concentration or lack of concentration is just either who we are, or we're maybe just a little bit tired, or we haven't drank enough water that day and I'm not able to concentrate as much. And so we overlook signs like not being able to concentrate. We forget that sometimes those kind of things can be signs of hidden anxiety. So if you're struggling to concentrate, if you're struggling to invest in tasks maybe that you found pretty straightforward before, you could understand that you're maybe experiencing signs of anxiety. It's worth delving a little bit deeper and assessing maybe that there are some anxiety underpinnings that are leading to that lack of concentration. Guys, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. This week we've been taking a look at the top 6 signs of hidden anxiety. If you've been enjoying today's video, make sure to like, you can subscribe to GetPsyched too, and if you've enjoyed today's video as well, you're definitely going to love this video on panic attacks, everything you need to know about panic attacks and overcoming them, and you can also check out other video content here too. Thanks again for watching, guys, and hopefully catch you next week.